We'll go ahead and start the meeting. We're now called to order. It's 7:10. This is Thursday, May 25th, 2017. This is the North Andover Board of Health. We're now open, and our first item of the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could all stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We don't have any public hearings before us tonight. We'll go to the approval of minutes. The minutes from April 20th have been circulated. We've all had a chance to look at them. Is there a motion on those?
Make a motion to approve April 20th meeting minutes for the North Andover Board of Health.
Second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll do this. Approved.
The one time?
Yeah. We don't really have any old business, or there may be some old business things we can put down into communications when we have a little more flexible talking time. Under new business, we have new staff to introduce.
Yes, I'd like to introduce the new public health nurse for the town of North Andover, Carolyn Ibbotson. And welcome. It's great to have you on board. Welcome to your first meeting. And anything you want to say or talk about?
No, I'm just excited to be here and get an opportunity to get out in the community and try to, help out where I can, and it'll be exciting.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
Good, very good. So then we'll move right down to communications, announcements, and discussion. So we'll sort of put this under the category of discussion. But for some time, we've been sort of having some informal conversation about water supply, water treatment, water matters. So we have with us tonight Glenn Alt and Tiffany from the North Andover Water Department. They're going to give us a presentation about what happens with water treatment. So having said that, I'll let you introduce yourself and take the floor.
Okay, I'm Glenn Alt. I'm the superintendent up at the water plant here in North Andover. This is Tiffany Blake, my senior water analyst, and we're happy to be here. We have one source for our water. The town of North Andover has one source. It's Lake Cochichewick. It's length is about 2.65 miles. It's just under 3/4 of a mile wide. We have a little over 7 miles of shoreline. The maximum depth is 45 feet. The minimum, or the average, is about 23. It holds about 4.3 billion gallons of water, which sounds like a lot, but last summer there wasn't that much in there. I can guarantee you, it was pretty low. The watershed is 2,732 acres, and the lake fills from the runoff from rain from that 2,700 acres, and we have some springs and brooks that help fill it. We use about 1.1 billion gallons a year on a normal year for treatment, fire protection, and for drinking, and we average about 3.2 million gallons a day. Year-round. Our average in the summer, we go anywhere from 6.5 to 7 million gallons in a day, depending if it's a bright sunny day or if it's raining. That makes a huge difference up there. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how the plant works. The water comes in from Lake Cochichewick. There's an intake that's about 100 or 150 yards out. It's 18 feet down. Gravity flows into this low-lift building that's pictured. And the first thing that happens is it goes through a traveling screen, and that removes any large debris, whether some fish get in there or sticks or something, and so that it doesn't get into our pumps. And then it goes into the wet well. And then from there, there's some pumps pump it up to the ozone tank and ozone chamber. And we create ozone gas on site. It doesn't last long. It's a very expensive thing to create, but it helps greatly breaking down organics. It just makes it easier to filter out everything. And then from there, we go into our it enters into the flocculation basins where we add a chemical called polyaluminum chloride. And basically what that does is it makes the impurities start sticking together, and we mix it in real fast. This is so that as it continues on, it'll settle out better, it'll get larger clumps. So then it goes into our settling basins. Settling basins is just what it sounds like. The large particles sink to the bottom, the clean water goes up over the top, and we remove the sludge in the bottom. It's a small layer with a vacuum system. And that way we keep as much moving parts out of it as possible so we don't stir it up. So now we have fairly clean water when it comes out of there, but not clean enough. From there it goes into, we have 8 carbon filters. And these filters, they remove the natural compounds, they remove taste and odor compounds, synthetic organic chemicals, and toxins. And the type of carbon we use is really great. It really does help clean up the water, makes it very, especially taste and odor, we can get the odors out, or bad taste out. After it goes through the filter, it goes into a tank underneath our building.
You say it's a really great kind of carbon?
Yeah.
Are there kinds of carbon to use for this?
They use activated coal, and some just use sand, and the stuff we use, GAC for short, granulated activated carbon. We have 4 feet of it, and it's very good at removing impurities. So after it runs through the filter, it goes into a tank underneath our plant that holds 600,000 gallons and 620,000 gallons. And just before it enters, we add chlorine in liquid form, use for disinfection. We add sodium hydroxide for pH control, which will help us out in the system later so we don't corrode the pipes. And at the end of this process, well, fluoride is added too there, I'm sorry, yeah, for dental care. At the end of this tank, whenever it's run through, we add a zinc orthophosphate, which is, that also helps coat the pipes so that we don't have the lead problems that a lot of towns that we're hearing about have. So once it's ready, we have 4 finished water pumps that pump it out into the system. We can pump up to 12 million gallons a day. Of course, we don't pump that much. It's not needed right now. But when the water comes out, it's very safe, odorless, colorless, and tasteless, because, there's no bad taste in it. We have 3 storage tanks. We've got an elevated storage tank up on Bradford Street that holds about 1 million gallons. And we have 2 in-ground tanks, one at Bear Hill and one at Sutton Hill, that hold about 2.2 million. So during the day, and then of course that goes to your homes and stuff, we pump the water out and it slowly fills these tanks. The extra that's not used by the households and businesses goes to these tanks. And our goal is by a certain time of the day, depending on what time of year, to have these tanks full, and then we shut the place down. And then it gravities overnight and feeds all the homes.
You shut the water plant down overnight because the tanks or the feed?
Yeah, they will take over basically they'll feed the town for the night.
So they pressurize the system.
Yeah, yep. So then we are required to use Massachusetts certified operators. We have 5 up there right now, very good operators. They're very conscious of what they're doing, and they monitor the water going out of the building. We have a SCADA system, computer system, that actually tracks everything, sets off alarm. There's an alarm. These guys find out what's going on, correct it as quickly as they can. And one thing we are constantly monitoring the water. Every 3 to 4 hours, we do a lab in-house, and then we have to report to DEP. And then they have met, if we break certain parameters, we have to report to them immediately. We usually do not break any of those parameters. We're way below them. But we're very fortunate, the town's fortunate, we have an on-site laboratory, our own. So now I'm going to turn the time over to Tiffany, and she can
Because
talk
that's what
about-
Tiffany does, run the lab, right?
She's our, that's why I'm letting her do this part.
So this next slide is showing some pictures from our on-site laboratory. On the left, you'll see our laboratory bench, and the far wall shows our continuous analyzers. We have continuous analyzers for turbidity measurements, for free chlorine, as well as fluoride and pH. And then on the bench there, it shows some of the instrumentation that we have in-house. We have a spectrophotometer, turbidimeter, and various probes. On the right, you'll see a water sample collection. So this is where we collect our samples every 3 hours, and it's a real-time sample from each stage of the treatment process. What we monitor for using the various equipment I briefly mentioned in the last slide. There's the continuous free chlorine, turbidity, and pH analyzers. We have our benchtop equipment, including a spectrophotometer, turbidimeter, and pH and fluoride probes. Out of the picture, we also have various equipment, including an incubator, an autoclave, DI unit. We use pocket colorimeters out in the field. Throughout our treatment process, we're typically concerned about 3 parameters, which would be pH, how acidic your water is, turbidity, which is a measure of how cloudy your water is, and that's formed by particulate matter in your water. And essentially, how we read that is in our turbidimeter, and how that works is it shines a light through your water sample, and it measures the intensity of how that light is scattered through the water sample. So of course, things with more particulate in the water will have a higher turbidity reading. We also measure apparent color for most of our treatment stages. Now, apparent color is measured in our spectrophotometer, so it measures transmittance of both dissolved and suspended particulate in your water. And throughout our stages, we'll find that our pH is typically higher as our finished water product is leaving the building, and of course, our turbidity is very, very low for our finished water product, as well as our color. And for finished water, we also test for several other parameters. We have phosphate and zinc. We also test for ozone and fluoride. Some of the most important monitoring we do for a critical chemical would be free chlorine residual. And we both do that in-house as well as out in the field when we go out and take samples. But some of the most important work that we do has to do with our bacteria analyses. So as Glenn was mentioning, we have reporting that we do for the Mass Department of Environmental Protection, and we're certified by Mass DEP to do bacterial analyses. So this is the analyses that we do most often for our bacteria testing. It's to make sure that the water is pathogen-free, just using a simple presence-absence method. And we test for total coliform, which is a bacteria found in soil, water, as well as human and animal waste. And we also test for E. coli, which is a subgroup of those fecal coliforms, where some strains are harmless and others can make us very, very sick. And how we do that, we have pre-approved sites that the Mass Department of Environmental Protection has okayed. They're typically around outskirts of town, and once a week, 3 times a month, we go out and we collect tap water samples from these pre-approved locations. And when we bring them back to our laboratory, we put a dehydrated medium into them, and essentially all that is food for bacteria. And we want to promote bacteria, if there's any present in the sample, to grow. So after we put that bacteria powder into the sample, we then incubate it at 35 degrees Celsius for 24 hours, come back and check. We want our samples to be clear from the samples that we collected around town. If there were to be total coliform present, it would turn yellow. And if there were E. coli present, it would fluoresce under a UV light, which is shown in the picture on this slide. We're also certified to do heterotrophic plate counts, or abbreviated as HPC. And this is where the sample of interest is added to another dehydrated medium that produces a blue fluorescence when metabolized by waterborne bacteria. And you typically check it twice, once at 48 hours, the next at 72 hours. And the number of wells that fluoresce correspond to the most probable number, which is actually expressed in colony forming units per milliliter of water. And we also do some source protection efforts at the treatment plant as well. We do both lake and watershed monitoring. This is a picture from our brook and tributary monitoring. We have 10 sites that we go to that drain into the lake. And we do various tests on that, flow readings out in the field, as well as pH and temperature. We also do bacteria analyses, as well as some chemical analyses, including nutrients such as nitrate, nitrite, phosphate, and alkalinity, turbidity, color, as well as some metals. We also do manganese and iron in-house, hardness, and things of that sort. So right now, we'd like to open it up to some questions, if you have any.
That was very good. Thank you. We don't hear much about our water treatment plant in North Andover. And the reason being is that it's out of sight, out of mind. It's well operated, it's well maintained, and it's not in the headlines at all. For example, the limit, and I'd like to hear from you about lead, because that has been a huge concern nationally and actually internationally. The allowable limit for lead is 15 parts per billion. Our average here is 0.2 parts per billion, well under the allowable limit. So kudos to the two of you and your staff for doing the job that has to be done. And as you know, I have a background in water treatment too, so I'm not just saying you're doing a good job without experience. You're doing a good job, and I have experience. I'd like to hear more from you about lead, and I spoke about it, the better part of a year or so ago, when they had all the problems from Flint, Michigan, and I was reading the headlines, and I actually look at all the news articles I can get my hands on. I looked at the testing data, and a lot of the people that were reporting didn't know what they were talking about. But it doesn't matter, because bad news makes headlines. It seems to me that the biggest problem that they had there at that time is they were not adding the orthophosphate. So as such, it was leaching. That has since been addressed. But I'd like to hear from you. Tell us about lead. Why is there such a concern about lead? And how are you getting the numbers down as low as you have?
Well, the reason we get the numbers down is because of the chemicals we use to coat the pipes, and we keep the pH at as close to 7 as possible, or a little above 7. 7's neutral, so if you get too low, under 7, it becomes acidic, and if it goes too high, it's alkali. We test for lead and copper every 3 years, and the reason we do that is because our numbers have been so low, they put us on a reduced plan. It used to be yearly. And because we've shown year after year that it's low, they've let us go every 3 years. We don't change our process in between testing. We keep it the same so that, at all time. Lead has been found to hurt children in their development, and that's the huge concern. At least that's, from my understanding, that's what we're trying to prevent, is development problems in children. So.
And correct me if I'm mistaken, but it's very hard to keep it down throughout North Andover. The reason being is that the lines are okay. You know, and again, you have a zinc orthophosphate treatment for corrosion inhibition. But once you leave the main, it goes to people's homes. And my home was built in 1688, and the lines are lead. And if anyone doesn't know if they have a lead line or not at their home, just take out a key and scratch it. Lead is very malleable, and you can see it. You can see the scratch, unlike copper. I'd like you to talk a little bit about people that have old houses, and as we talked about before our meeting in 1986, the federal government says no more lead soldering of copper lines and so forth. And houses have been tested up to pretty much 1986. But I'd like to hear more from you about the testing. You mentioned a little bit about that. You said once a week, about 3 times a month, unless I misunderstood you. I'm talking about the schools, I'm talking about businesses, and I'm talking about homes. Also, too, there were things that you can do, and I'd like to hear from you, to keep the lead down in your home, like opening up the spigot before you drink water. But
Okay.
tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, there are some lead services in town. A lot of them were replaced over the years, and they're actually talking about actively trying to get more and replace as much as we can. The testing, the testing once a week for 3 weeks, that's bacteria. We don't do lead all that time. That's only every 3 years, once every 3 years right now. Again, we have to pick homes and get pre-approved by DEP. We've gone through as many records as we can, and we recently just did a bunch, got permission. We sent out approximately 100 letters looking for places, and we ended up with 40 affirmatives to get, and we have to do 30. The schools, we just went through a program. The governor gave a bunch, I think it was a couple $1 million for towns to test the schools. We did test the schools. Out of all, the several hundred samples we took, there was, I believe it was less than 10 came back positive, or we had to take action. Some of those we found out were because this particular faucet or whatever hadn't been used for 6 months or a year. So there was the protocol on that is, and we tried this out, you flush it out for a little while before you use it, because we took a sample without flushing, there was just a little bit of lead. We took it after flushing, and it was pretty much clear. So that is one way to prevent lead in your homes. Especially
How long should one flush?
a minute or two. It usually will take care of it. That's what we were finding.
Now, suppose that someone that's listening says to themselves, geez, well, my house is built before 1986, so there's lead in the solder. If the house was built a long time ago, there may be lead lines. If they are concerned, can they call you in your office, and can you test people's water supply? How does that work? Tell us about that.
We do test, we get calls on occasion for people to test their samples or their water. They come to us, we have the sample bottles, and the actually resident will collect it themselves. There's a protocol that we give a list of how they do it. Because usually when it's collected, it's early in the morning when you first get up, because the water has to sit for 6 to 8 hours before you take a sample. So it's kind of hard for us to be there, and then you'd have to wait for us to get there before you used any water. So the resident usually takes it. Private wells and stuff, there's a fee that we charge, and we send it off and get the results and share them with them.
Are there any residential homes that are excluded from that? In other words, can any of us, because we all own homes here in North Andover, contact you and say, gee, can you check, I want to have this water check, and they go in and get this sample bottle or container, whatever?
Yeah, no, there's no one excluded.
There's no one excluded?
No, it's just, there's certain houses we have to do for ourselves, but if other people would want it that aren't on our list, then we could There's a fee, like I said, there's a fee.
And you mentioned in your presentation that that a reservoir holds 4.3 billion gallons, and you also said it was very low. Out of curiosity, how low was it during that drought last year?
We have a device, a measuring device, and it's a pretty simple device. And somewhere along the line, they said the elevation when it's full is 113.6 feet. I don't know where that came from. Usually it'll drop down to 109, 110. This year it was 106, which was about a foot above the lowest it's ever been.
And about
So-
how much water would that be, you know? Because you
I-
can
I'm
literally
not-
see islands in the lake. I've never seen them. I've lived in North Andover most
Right.
of my life. I've never seen these islands.
Well, to put it in perspective, the intake is 18 feet below the surface. So if it goes down close to that, we can't get water
You
anymore.
run out of water.
We run out of water.
And then
So-
what?
Doesn't matter if there's a billion gallons of water, you can't get it.
That's a good question.
Yeah,
We do
we
have
a plan B?
interconnections. Huh?
Do we have a Plan B in place in North
There
Andover?
are interconnections with other towns. If they're able to supply us water, that's where we get it.
I noticed that, I think it's Great Pond Road, not far from Butcher Boy, that there was a brick building there on the side of the lake that was there one day
It's
and
gone.
gone the next day. What's that all about? What is that building?
That was actually one of the first pumping stations they
Oh.
had here,
Oh.
and that was back before there was a lot of treatment. The water was basically pumped into that building, give it a little chlorine or something, and sent out to be drank. There was no filtering. Since there was the Giardia scare back in the 80s, it was before my time. That's when town had to build the water treatment plant with filters. So then that plant went offline.
You mentioned that you have 5 certified or licensed employees, which is good. And at times the plant is down, because you don't have to be there 24 hours a day, 7
Right.
days a week, and you do have those 3 storage tanks. But when your plant is down, is there any concern, say, with overdosing the chlorine or the fluoride?
No, because those pumps are off. Everything's shut off.
Oh, they're off?
Everything
So it's
at the-
already been chlorinated and fluoridated?
Yeah, it's
when-
already-
When it goes into the tanks themselves?
Correct.
Right,
I
that's what
see.
I said, it gets treated at the plant. it
At
goes
the
in
plant
tanks,
and
it
pumped
goes
out
there with
from there.
the additives already in it.
There are alarms, and we have it set up so that if there is an issue, it will call us. And then somebody will respond.
How long has that plant been online?
Since the early 90s, I believe it went on.
And before then, there was
The
nothing?
North Station, the building that went away.
Can I ask a question?
No. No, you can't. Let me continue.
Joe, we're going to take turns here.
this is
I'm
like
still
the,
the chair of this
this is
committee.
like
You take a break for a minute.
This is like the town meeting, Larry. Ooh, we don't want to go there. Go
I'd
ahead.
like to make a motion to limit debate to 2 minutes per speaker.
Motion approved. Most people don't know, like, when I go in my basement, I see the big 1-inch copper pipe coming from the foundation. So I assume, and most people probably don't know, my house is built in '78, so I know I have copper pipes throughout the house. I have copper coming in from the ground. But what is it connecting to? Copper pipes?
A variety, ductile pipe is the cement line ductile pipe, or, see, I don't do distribution very much, so I don't.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I know there's ductile pipe out there, and I'm not sure what other types he has.
I
But
just
it's
didn't know if it
usually-
was like.
They range anywhere from 6 to, I think, 12 inches common out.
Okay. No, I didn't know if it was like cast iron or these
There may be
plastic
some cast
PVCs.
iron, there may be some,
Yeah.
but I can't honestly answer that because I don't handle the distribution system. That's another department.
Yeah. Another year from now, we'll get them in too.
Yeah, there you go.
You said, so I see people fishing using electric motors. I mean, people watching now, maybe they don't realize you cannot use anything other than, and please confirm this, electric motor if you wanted to get around. You can't use gas or anything like that. Anything
That
with
is-
hydrocarbons.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. It's electric motor or manpower. That's the only way you can use your boats to get around.
Does the Brooks School get an exception from that?
Brooks School, because of their sculling or whatever.
They're
they
allowed a
need pers-
certain number of boats with so many
Yeah.
sailboats.
So I think they have 2 boats that they have permission to be out there just during that practice time. The fire department has a boat, and we have a boat with a motor on it,
Okay.
so we can go out and check and sample.
When you do use the boat, just because I don't know this answer, do the filters take care of actually the activated carbon should probably take care of the hydrocarbons put out by the spent fuel, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. You also mentioned, and people may not understand it or know it, but you said you have a way of, like, there's turtles and fish and things, they could get in there. How do you, again, section that off so that, or prevent little animals from getting in there?
There's a couple pieces of equipment in that low-lift building that I showed, and it's called a rotating screen. It's just a huge screen that keeps coming up, and it picks the stuff up and drops it in this trough so it doesn't get through.
Okay. When as Joe mentioned about our water source, Lake Achitchewit, and we've had rain now for off and on for a month and a half. It's been the wettest time I've seen in a long time. So when we get, I don't know if you know this, but if we get an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours of rain, heavy rain, like, do you know how much it puts back into our water supply? And
I've noticed, like, if we get an inch of rain, it'll usually go up 2 inches, 2.5 inches. The lake will rise that much.
Is that like millions of gallons, millions and millions of gallons? or-
Yeah, and again, I could figure it out. I could do the math, but I never tried it.
Okay. No, I'm just curious. I mean, people driving by, you look at it and go, gee, it's raining. I wonder how good is that for our town to replenish our water supply? And
Our supply right now is full.
it is full. Good.
We actually had to release some because we were too full.
That's all I have right now.
Remember last year, there was...
Wait, Joe, you get,
Joe, you get at the end of the rest of us. I have a question. It has to do with, we just had a town meeting not too long ago, and one of the things they talked about was the upgrade of the ozonator, I think, and that that the 20 years had elapsed since it was installed, and it was time to kind of upgrade it, and so we approved some money to do that. Can you just tell us about our investment?
That's the ozone system. It's being replaced hopefully this coming winter. That's what we use it kills off the organics. It helps treat those, break organics down. It helps us with some manganese to break it up so it's easier to treat. It eases the treatment process. It's easier on our filters and everything. We use less chemical downstream to treat the water with the ozone. It's basically it's expensive to run, but it's the system we're replacing was put in I think it was the mid-90s. It wasn't original with the plant, but now parts are almost impossible to find. The control boards, we're hoping to keep it running long enough until we get the new system in.
So it uses electricity to generate the ozone.
It is, yes.
So that's where the expense is.
That's where the expense is.
All right. And then I had a couple of other things. We've had problems with blue-green algae in Stevens Pond, probably just because of the small size, the shallow depth, and the fact that the water gets really warm at certain times of the summer and things like that. Do we have that problem in the lake itself?
On occasion, we do have an algae outbreak. And then we treat it with copper sulfate. Again, we have a company comes in. They, depending on the depth of the lake, they know what dose to give it so that we don't over treat it.
So they actually treat the source, they don't treat the water in the plant.
Right,
that
we
treats
treat the source. They'll go out there, they'll be out there in their boats spraying this stuff out there,
All right.
riding around.
And then I have another question. Most of my understanding of water chemistry comes from having a swimming pool, which is not basically making water to drink. But one thing that I'm aware of is that when you add chlorine to water, you raise the pH. And it's just kind of interesting to me that we're adding alkali to the water, as well as that water that comes out of the lake naturally acidic, and then it has to be raised up, or does the chlorine raise it up even more, or how does that work?
Well, because of the actual, where the water comes in, its pH is usually close to 7 too. But then as we're doing the different treatment processes, it lowers. So then we bring it back up with the chlorine and the caustic soda.
All right. Then one last question. I'll yield the floor to my esteemed colleague on either side. It just turns out that I happen to live downhill from the Bradford Street water tower.
Sure.
And when I've measured the pounds per square inch, it's exceeded 90 pounds. So I actually had to put a limiter on my house because I ended up losing a mixing valve. And,
Yes.
and it's my understanding that the toilet valves are also very sensitive to the high.
That would be.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, do we have a target PSI? I imagine it's different depending on where you are. If you're close to the highest point, you're going to have a high PSI. If you're, 3/4 of the mile down the street, some of that pressure has been dissipated. How do you determine that?
It was engineered out long before I came here, what height they have the tanks at to give everybody the required pressure. We've had to put booster stations in because people have just the opposite problem you do. They don't have enough pressure. It's just, we live on hills, so.
We have one of those in my neighborhood, and I recall, we used to have a pump in our basement that went on when the pressure would go down, and then the town it's in the Blueberry Hill and Chestnut Street area. I seem to remember that number being around 70, kind of 65 to 70,
Yeah.
I think PSI was a goal.
That's the goal. That's, we're required to have, I believe it's 25 to 30 PSI, but in order to get that everywhere, the tanks have to be up and other people have it higher at 90, 100. So, and then they need to put a pressure reducer on their system.
You have to be careful with your toilets.
I'll tell you that the company that made the mixing valve in my shower said if your pressure exceeds 45 PSI, that we're not going to warrant it. So
Oh, well.
that's exactly what I dialed into my system. So I'm at 45.
Yeah, mine's over 80. Mine's in the mid-80s.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, it's awesome to have 90 PSI. The shower will blow you across the room. But, well, thank you.
I want to ask a sort of a question. I mean, we at the Board of Health spent a fair amount of time looking at watershed issues and looking at septic systems and encouraging things there to protect the watershed area. But I want to ask a question again, going back to the lead question. Maybe this is for you, Tiffany. You do a good job with the protection of the lead and keeping that down in the system, but to what degree are we, I'll just use the word, a little bit lucky that the watershed doesn't have a lot of natural lead that it kind of leaches into the lake, that you then have to sort of deal with it at a higher baseline level? Does that make any sense, that the runoff from the area picks up lead coming into the lake and then you have to bring it down? The 0.015 that's on here, is that a significant decrease? Do you have to work hard to take it down from the lake level, or does it start pretty low in the lake to start with?
It's
Very low in the
very
lake to
low.
start with.
Like, it's, I would guess almost zero. Yeah, because there's no natural lead that we know of around, but most of the lead problems come from the pipes themselves, which is, back in the day, they used lead solder. That's why they banned it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you guys for coming and doing this presentation.
Wait,
I know-
Joe, you have
Joe,
any
you have
more?
more questions? Come on, Joe, wake up.
I'll yield the floor back to Joe.
Last year, we had a trash truck that spilled over the side of the lake. Any
We did.
adverse effect?
No,
No?
there wasn't. There was concern, of course, when you first heard about it. That's how I started my morning off that day, was you have a trash truck in the lake. Luckily, very little fuel was spilled. The firemen and the other personnel were there and were able to contain it pretty quickly. The cleaning company come in and were able to get it soaked up, so. And they even said at that time the best thing for the fuel was just it evaporate, but they were able to get a lot of it picked up. We had no effects. We did extra testing and it never showed any increase in anything that was hazardous.
What are they building around? They just finished one major project. I don't know what that was. The road on the side of Butcher Boy. A big,
Oh,
took almost a year.
that's probably the raised pond sewer station.
Is that what that is? All right.
Yeah.
And I see they're doing another project that looks like on the lakeside, on the same road.
That's taken down the old pumping station.
Was that what it, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's been a long process, but that should be down, and they're making that into a parking area.
Good.
Well, while you're here with us, is there anything that we can do from the Board of Health perspective or initiative to help you maintain water quality?
What do you think?
Just helping raise awareness to the public that we're really maximizing our efforts to make sure that their water is safe and that there's no reason to worry. There's continuous monitoring going on all the time.
That's one of the reasons why you guys are here, to help get the word out, teach people what you guys do, how much monitoring you do, and the work and effort that you guys put into the entire town water supply. So we can do more. We can air this 8 times next month instead of 4. Great. And have you guys back again to do more, do a follow-up. I definitely want to thank you guys for coming out and taking coming here at night when you're not supposed to be working, but we appreciate it. And we did do a little survey and sent out some questions. Thanks to Chris McClure. He sent something out on the website and did a North Andover tweet. And we did get some responses back. Some of the questions had to do with chemicals. I know you guys went through a big list of chemicals that you guys use in your treatment process. Could you give a quick summary or synopsis of what you guys use, just so it's easier for people to look at and kind of comprehend all at once?
We use polyaluminum chloride, and that's a coagulant, and that basically is the chemical we use to make the particles stick together to settle out. Most of that is removed. Either it settles out with the material or it's removed at the filter. We also use sodium hypochlorite, is liquid chlorine, for disinfection. We use 15% sodium hypochlorite. Your household bleach is 5%. So it's a strong chlorine, but we want to make the water, make sure there's no bacteria in it. We do use sodium hydroxide. We use for pH adjustment, and that's basically what that's used for. And then we use zinc orthophosphate for corrosion control, and we also put in fluoride, and that's the chemicals we use. Ozone, we use that is considered a chemical, but its shelf life is so short. It's gone by the time it gets into the settling bases. It just disappears.
Today I received a 2016 North Andover Water Quality Report. It says it's online, so I went online, just go to the town website. It's very good. It's 8 pages, and all this information that they're going over right now is, much of this information is here. And if you're interested in chemicals, it's just one paragraph, tells what chemicals are used and where they're used. But most important, it goes over all the test results. And they're all very good. Violations, no, all the ways down.
Excellent. Is there anything else, Glenn or Tiffany, you'd like to say to the residents of North Andover? Because we actually have quite a few people watch.
Yeah, Larry's wife and my wife.
But no, we do have quite a few people that watch.
like Tiffany said, be aware of what's going on. One things we have concerns about when we're doing tributary sampling is people inadvertently throwing stuff that ends up into the stream, ends up into the lake. That, you know, a small amount doesn't hurt, but over many years, depending on what it is, it may hurt something along. It may promote algae growth. So just be aware of what your activities are around the lake. Would be great.
Are there any rainwater catch basins that end up in the lake?
From the streets, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Is that outside that area that you mentioned, or is it all within that area?
all with anything in that area usually will go into the lake.
I see.
That,
But outside rainwater and so forth, catch basins that will not go?
yeah, they'll go the other way. There's a distinct area that the water will all flow into the lake. It's that 2,000 acres. And then anything outside of that usually goes to someone else's river, lake, pond, something. So, yeah.
So, thank you guys for coming, I appreciate it. Actually, one thing we didn't touch upon was beach water testing. We are in charge of testing the beach water on a weekly basis throughout the swimming season. We used to send those samples off-site to get tested. Now we can do them in-house. So I thank you guys for your efforts with that as well. Very
So you
nice.
do our beach water testing too?
We used to have to send it out, but now that they can do the bacterial testing, we do it right in-house here, and it's fantastic. And if there's any issues, we know right away, we can take care of anything. So thank you guys for that as well. I guess one thing the people should definitely think about is if they have questions or they have questions about their water, you guys can do testing for them. I think that's a big thing. If people have old houses with potential lead soldering or lead lines, give you guys a call, you give a sample bottle, they can get their water tested. And then if they're on private well, you guys will do it for a fee. Send that off, get that tested. I think that's really important too, so that people know that they can get their own private wells tested, see if there's any bacteria or any contamination. I think is a very important thing for people to realize and to know and to utilize.
You know, one thing that's, just one more thing, one thing that's probably, I'm sure, I would imagine is not tested for, is a variety of drugs that people throw out somewhere, dump out, and other products like that. I mean, there's probably no measurable way to see how it would make its way, you know, to the aquifer, yeah, but to our...
There's a lot of organics, so they'd be taken out in the ozone and chlorine process.
Would they? Okay.
I would think.
I would think.
If they're
I'm not
organic
sure.
compounds, if it's like,
But that's a concern primarily with wastewater.
Wastewater,
treatment
yeah,
facilities,
Yeah,
not
that's
water.
not so much coming into the lake, that's on the other side.
yeah.
Okay.
But if there are organics that, that are, active drugs or things like that, I would think that
Yeah.
the oxidation of them would basically make them, come out of solution and drop out, flocculation and things of that nature.
Okay.
Thanks very much for being here tonight.
You're
Thank you for having us.
Thank you,
We're
both of you.
making some water for you outside tonight.
Yeah. A lot of water being made today.
Yeah.
Is our water from the plant as good as this?
Better.
All right.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
You know, our water's so good, why don't we have North Andover Springs water and bottle it
We do.
instead of Poland Springs?
Yeah. Just labeled with a fancy one so they can charge you.
That's right.
All right, any other announcements or discussion anybody would like to raise? We don't have anything in our packets, nothing particular newsletters or anything tonight. But you want to talk about things, put you on the spot. Things you sort of maybe your interest in public health. What kind of, I know you haven't developed projects yet, but sort of where you're, sort of at the 20,000-foot level, where your priority might kind of look.
I think I have a passion for like nutrition and physical exercise and promoting just a general healthy outlook for all ages, I guess, starting at the elementary level all the way up to like the senior center, and trying to promote just the way people look at maybe nutrition and realize how it affects, you know, the way people eat. It can raise their blood pressure, that can lead to, you know, coronary artery disease, that kind of stuff. The way kids, you know, exercise, nutrition, they look at that kind of stuff. I also think trying to get out there into the senior center and just raising awareness with like medication compliance, that kind of stuff. And I don't know, I'm trying to just wrap my head around everything, and so.
So you mentioned the senior center. Is this more of a
Thank you again.
concerted? Yes.
Thank you.
Is this more of a concerted effort now than it was, say, before you came aboard?
What do you mean? Because I just started on Tuesday, so I'm still figuring out what they need from me. I know they have, you know, they have a lot of great programs there, which I'd like to be involved in, and try to even create more programs and work with the seniors. Is that what you were asking? If it was,
Well,
I don't know what was done before me.
The town nurse before you, she was also involved too. I just wanted to know if this involvement has been ratcheted up. And you're shaking your hand, so
Yes,
it
absolutely.
seems like it has been.
Yes, she's already met with Carla of the Senior Center. We're going to be actually getting together again probably next week to sit down and find out what more we can do with them. I've had conversations on several occasions with Irene about doing more with like the health fair and doing more presentations and stuff like that. So we're really trying to figure out what the needs are and then try to address all those needs.
Yeah, new people, new ideas,
Absolutely.
a fresh
Yeah.
line of sight, and that's what's good about it.
We'll expect a full report at the next meeting. All right, short agenda meeting tonight.
Yes, I wasn't sure how long the presentation was going to be. I figured it would get pretty involved and there'd be some good discussion. I know that Joe is very enthusiastic about this subject, so good job, guys. That was fantastic. It was a great presentation, and I'm glad they were able to do this. I have talked to Wheelabrator and TEC, who's the environmental monitor, and we're doing something similar as well. So hopefully we can pull that together for the near future and do something else like this at one of our upcoming meetings.
Perhaps someone from GLSD too on wastewater treatment.
Okay, I can look into
Yeah,
that
that'd
as
be
well.
great.
Yeah.
Didn't we last year vote to change the registration, the permitting of our food certificates and something else we did? Instead of doing it all in December,
Food permitting.
food permitting, what
It
it was,
was moved out to the end of February.
how did it go? I haven't,
And it was, I mean, it was the first year, it was a change.
yeah,
So, and with the move involved as well, there was a change in date and a change in location. So some things kind of got missed, and people sent things to the wrong location, the wrong month. So it was definitely a work in progress. We're still finding applications that are, you know, making their way to us now because they got lost somewhere. And we're finding people that haven't redone their permits yet, so it's definitely a transition. But I think with the permitting seasons that we have, moving all of the food away from January 1st, which is the deadline for a bunch of our other, or the starting date of a lot of other permits, it was a real burden on the staff before, so this is gonna work out much better. And we're also moving to online permitting as well this year. So,
excellent.
Any
It
further
took away the
developments on
hassle
the...
factor of having to do food renewals in their very busy season,
and you have the holidays too, which doesn't help because people take vacations. You have all the other permitting to do as well, and then you have the entire food program, which is hundreds of permits.
We have summer camps coming up shortly, right?
Yes, we do. We're meeting with Little Sprouts tomorrow.
We got summer camps, we have our
Pools.
brand-new farmer's market coming up shortly.
Absolutely.
We have swimming pools. I don't know how many public swimming pools we have in town.
small number, I think.
Yeah.
I was going to ask on the farmer's market, when will
16.
that be? How do we stand?
We're looking pretty good. I have a folder with all the applications right now. I have talked to Phil DeCollegiero last week. We're getting more in, and he's working on getting more vendors. So it's going very smoothly right now, but there'll be a bigger push probably towards the end of June.
That's the
And
target
when is
date,
the
is that June?
kickoff date?
Yep. So I'm sure as people get on board at the last minute, we'll be getting all of those as well. But we do have Sweet Safe lined up to do the inspections, as well as myself and Michelle, to get everybody up and running right off the start. As per your request, we have waived the fees this year, so there's no fees charged to the farmers market to help them get up and running and get established, and entice vendors to come in.
Do we know when the first day will be?
I want to say at the end of June, June 20th.
There is an announced date. It's on Facebook. I
Yes.
think it's the
Stay tuned.
third weekend of June or the last.
It's on Facebook?
Yeah.
Really?
I know it's the end of June, June 25th to 26th, I believe.
Are we doing summer camps now? Or we've already done those?
We are just getting into the summer camp
We are.
season, yeah.
Okay,
The applications have been coming in. Most of them don't start up until the end of next month,
okay.
and then throughout the summer.
Ice cream trucks, anybody put their name in yet?
Not yet,
Okay.
not yet,
Okay.
for ice cream trucks.
Or for farmers market, because we do have a food truck.
No, he has ice cream.
Ice cream truck, we do.
Is it Mimsey's?
Separate regulation on ice cream.
Yeah, ice cream, yeah, it's separate.
Mimsey's. Okay, so that's new. Okay.
Tony, they can still hear you.
I'll finish up with one thing. The Board of Selectmen have been doing, for the past several years, they've been taking an annual report from the chair of the boards in community development. So last year, I reported to the Board of Selectmen on the highlights of the past year of the Board of Health and initiatives we were looking to do the upcoming year. So since I still hold the chair position, I was invited to go, and I'm going in 2 weeks to the Board of Selectmen. So I will enjoin my members if you would send me your comments on things you think that have been highlights of the past year, I'll collate them into a report I can give to the Board of Selectmen, and things that we think we may look forward to, objectives, initiatives for the upcoming year, something I can give to the Board of Selectmen in a 5 to 10 minute report. I don't think they're looking for anything exhaustive, but it's just sort of an interactive, more interactive with the community development boards. It's us, now we went through this before, us, zoning, conservation, and planning.
Yep.
So we have 2 and 2, short reports, but, kind of a bullet list with the Board of Selectmen might ask questions of things that they want to know more about or things that they are interested in, so.
Frank, is there any way for you to put together what was accomplished from last year's priorities and what is still outstanding, so we have an idea
Sure.
of what's left?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. Thank
The
you.
presentation you gave too was very good. Very good.
What,
Which presentation?
what presentation?
Last year, Board of Selectmen.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
last year.
okay.
Well, I rehearsed it at home many, many, many times.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
Thank you for your years of service prior to adjourning.
Absolutely.
This is your last meeting as chairman after, how many years?
I think 11.
11? Well, I'm sure the board is.
It's been an honor and a
very-
pleasure.
Yes.
I'm glad to have served the town. I'm glad to pass it on to my esteemed colleague, Mr. Fixler.
Yes.
When you close tonight's meeting, you have to use the gavel.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we still have a motion before us.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're closed.